There was a phrase Roman mothers used to frighten their children into silence. Hannibal is at the gates. This was a real warning. For 15 years, Rome lived in fear of one man, a commander who destroyed army after army, and won some of the greatest victories in military history. Yet somehow, Rome survived. How do you defeat every army Rome sends against you and still lose the war? Most people know Hannibal Barca for two things: elephants and the Alps. But that is not the real story. The real story is how one commander brought the most powerful republic in the Mediterranean to the edge of total collapse. By the end of this video you will understand 5 things. How Hannibal got into Italy in the first place. How he destroyed Roman armies again and again. Why Rome did not fall when it should have. And the single decision that decided the entire war. We are covering 5 turning points. Let us start at the beginning. Before Hannibal ever set foot in Italy, Rome had already created its greatest enemy. Hannibal was born in Carthage, in a city that had already been humiliated by Rome after the First Punic War. His father, Hannibal Barca, made Rome the personal enemy of his household. Ancient accounts tell us that Hannibal swore an oath as a child. He would never be a friend of Rome. But this was not just revenge. It was preparation. He grew up on campaign, not learning theory, learning war itself. Terrain, speed, psychology, deception. By the time he took command of Carthaginian forces in Spain, he was not just a general, he was a system built for one purpose: breaking Rome. Rome thought it was facing another army. It was actually facing a man who had been preparing for this war his entire life. Hannibal was not simply leading an army. He was leading something much more dangerous. Commander who understood Rome better than Rome understood itself. And his first move shocked everyone. Rome expected the war to be fought far away, in Spain or at sea, not in Italy. In 218 BC, Hannibal did the unthinkable. He left Spain and marched east, crossed rivers, through Gaul, into the Alps. Rome assumed the mountains would stop him. They did not. Snow, hunger, landslides, hostile mountain tribes attacking from above. His army was torn apart. He lost more than half his force making that crossing. And still he emerged in northern Italy. Roman commanders were stunned, because the war was no longer coming. It was already there. The Alps were not a barrier. They were Hannibal's entrance. And Rome had no idea the war had already begun. Hannibal had crossed the Alps. Rome was stunned. But the worst was still coming. Rome tried to respond quickly. It sent armies north to crush him before he could stabilize. It failed. First at the Trebia River, then at Lake Trasimene. Hannibal did not fight fair battles. He engineered situations where Rome's greatest strengths became its greatest weaknesses. Ambushes, terrain traps, hidden movements. Roman armies were not just defeated, they were outthought. And each loss made Rome more desperate. Rome was not simply losing battles, it was losing confidence. And that is where empires start to crack. Rome had suffered defeats before, but what happened next at Cannae would become a nightmare taught in military academies more than 2,000 years later. In 216 BC, Rome decided to end it. It raised one of the largest armies in its history, maybe 70,000 to 80,000 soldiers, and marched to meet Hannibal at Cannae. Rome's plan was simple: crush him with numbers. But Hannibal did not resist. He shaped the battle. He placed his weaker troops in the center and allowed them to slowly fall back. Rome pushed forward, thinking it was winning. That was the trap. As the center bent inward, Hannibal's flanks closed in from both sides. His cavalry destroyed Rome's wings, swung around behind, and sealed the encirclement. Roman soldiers were packed so tightly, they could not even raise their swords. What followed was not a battle. It was collapse. Tens of thousands of Romans died in a single afternoon. And became the most studied battle in military history? The perfect double envelopment. And Rome became afraid of something it had never feared before. A commander who could erase entire armies in hours. After Cannae, Rome should have collapsed. Allies began to hesitate. Cities questioned their loyalty. And Hannibal had a choice. He did not march on Rome. Historians still debate why. No siege equipment, exhaustion, political calculation. Whatever the reason, he stayed in Italy. And Rome did something nobody expected. It did not surrender. It adapted. It rebuilt its armies. It changed its recruitment rules. It armed slaves and gave them freedom in exchange for fighting. And it refused to break. While Hannibal won battles, Rome won time. Then Rome changed its strategy entirely. It stopped trying to defeat him directly. It just refused to lose. Hannibal could destroy armies, but he could not destroy a state. That refused to collapse. And that became the turning point of the entire war. Hannibal came closer than any foreign enemy ever had. Yet Rome endured. He brought the war into Italy. He destroyed Roman armies again and again. He executed one of the greatest military maneuvers in history at Cannae. And he forced Rome into the deepest crisis it had ever faced. But Rome survived for one reason. It did not need to win quickly. It only needed to last longer than Hannibal could stay. And in surviving, it learned how to become an empire. But that raises a bigger question. If Rome barely survived Hannibal, what kind of empire did it become? After learning how close it came to destruction, Hannibal failed to destroy Rome. But in trying, he transformed it. The republic that emerged from this war was no longer fighting simply to survive. It was learning how to dominate. And from that moment onward, Rome would become one of the most relentless powers the ancient world had ever seen. Because Rome learned a lesson it would never forget. Never again would it allow itself to come this close to extinction. Subscribe to Legion and Empire, because next time, we follow the man who finally defeated Hannibal, and discover how Rome turned survival into conquest.